18135, 1855 kit lens, 1770, 50mm prime, 5200 zoom, 170-500 super zoom. All these different focal lengths. Well, how does that actually translate when you're taking a photo, and what does it all mean? Stay tuned and let's find out. Hey, what's going on, everybody? So today the subject is lens focal lengths, what the differences are. I know it seems to be a topic that has come up recently in regards to some beginners in photography, where the confusion is what's the difference with 18mm, 24mm, 35, 55, and the other thing too is they get a kit lens, it's 18 to 55, but they're also being told to get a 50mm lens, and the confusion is, well, my kit lens already does 50mm, so why should I have to buy another 50mm lens? Quickly, the difference is a prime lens will always, not also, but always have a much sharper image, a lot more detail, a lot more clarity, and they generally have a much more open aperture, so you can blur the background. It makes it more of a 3D kind of look. Luckily, I actually have a 50mm 1.8 aperture, so I can show exactly what the difference is between 55 or 50mm on a kit lens and 50mm on an actual prime lens. The difference is literally night and day. You can't get 50mm prime is absolutely incredible. Anyway, and I fully do believe that every photographer should have a 50mm 1.8 or 1.4, 50mm prime lens anyways. If you want a slightly more wider angle of view, similar to what we see with our eyes, then you should actually invest in a 35mm prime as well. Anyhow, with that said, our subject is going to be this little guy. You know, keeping up with the holidays and everything, Scooby-Doo! So, yeah, I've got the kit lens mounted here on my camera. It's an 1855, just like pretty much every other kit lens. And take some shots of Snoopy. Not Snoopy. Oh, man. Yeah, I'm kind of tired. Snoopy. It's not even the right color, man. What? Anyway, alright, so I'm going to take some shots on the tripod, so I will not be moving the camera whatsoever. I'll do it by remote control, and all I'm going to be doing is adjusting the focal length and then swapping lenses. The camera is going to remain in the exact same place, and that way you'll see exactly what the differences are as you change the focal length. And yeah, we'll just go from there. Okay, so just so that you can see the scene as it is set up, I've got the camera way back here. So we're looking at that distance away in regards to how far that actually is. I don't have a measuring tape, so I don't know exactly, but it's approximately, well, I don't know, about 3 feet, 3.5 feet or so. Between the camera and Scooby-Doo, not Snoopy. I don't know what I was thinking. Anyway, so right now it is set at 18mm, so I'll take a shot at 18mm, and yeah, then you'll see what that looks like. And the settings are 800 ISO, 1/15 of a second at f5.6. Actually, what I'll do is I'll run everything as open as possible. So I'll change the aperture to 3.5 at 18mm. Now, they are variable aperture lenses, unfortunately. That's how it is with the kit lens. So the most open aperture you can get is at the widest angle, so 18mm at f3.5. And at 55 it'll be at f5.6. That's a whole other discussion. Right now just want to show the different angles of view, but I will change the aperture to 3.5, which will actually change all the settings. So let me just go ahead and do that. Okay, so the settings are now at f3.5, ISO 800, and 1/20th of a second. So I'll just go ahead and take a shot with the remote here. Okay, and at 18 millimeters, you'll be able to see pretty much just into the beginning of my kitchen area and all the way to the back patio door, spanning pretty much the whole width of the couch, as well as part of the ceiling area and the whole back wall by the dining room. Now I'm going to change the focal length to, say, 24 millimeters and take a shot there. Okay, so at 24 millimeters, you can actually see that the top of the picture at the back of the room is cut off, and it's more zoomed in, so to speak. I guess sort of like crop. And the width of the photo has been cut off as well, so you can't actually see into the beginning of my kitchen, and part of the back patio door has now been cut out of the frame as well. So now I'm going to actually change the focal length to 35, and I'll show you what that looks like. I should have mentioned before, since I changed it to 24 millimeters, the aperture did change from 3.5 to f4. All the other settings are still the same, so 1/20th of a second, ISO 800. Now when I change it to 35, the aperture is now at 4.5. So that's what happens with a variable aperture lens, is as you zoom in, the aperture actually changes, which affects how much of the background you can blur and how much light is actually getting through the lens. I'm going to go ahead and take a shot at 35 millimeters, and you'll see what that looks like. Okay, so the picture at the back of the room is pretty much entirely cut off now. It's a lot more focused on the subject, and you can just look and compare, rewind the video if you need to. Yeah, but it is a pretty remarkable difference between 18 millimeters on the wide angle side and 35, which is considered a standard view. And I guess from here, I'll just ramp it right up to 50. And then I'll do one more at 55. The reason I'm going to stop at 50 is because when I put the prime lens on, you'll actually see how much of a difference a prime lens at the same focal length actually does make in real world photography situation. So I'm going to go ahead and change this up to 50 millimeters, which would bring the aperture, I believe, to 5.6. And then I'll do one more at 55, and then I'll switch over to the prime lens. Okay, so at 50 millimeters, it's pretty much focused solely on the couch. That's pretty much it. There really isn't much else to see beyond the couch and the subject, of course, Scooby-Doo. And I was right, the aperture did change to 5.6. Now one more shot at 55 millimeters, and then I'll switch over to the prime lens and show you what 50 millimeters on a prime lens looks like. Okay, so at 55 millimeters, the only real difference is, I guess, slight 3D-ish effect, kind of. Because one of the things with zoom is another artifact called lens compression, which basically you're isolating the subject because, you know what, it's really difficult to explain lens compression. Actually, you should look at my other video on my channel that may help you with understanding lens compression. It has to do with the area of focus in regards to the depth divided or multiplied or divided by the amount of zoom and length or distance between the subject and the camera and what you're focusing on. It's a whole convoluted, difficult thing to explain, but it does exist. It's not something that's made up. But keeping things as simple as possible. So 55, the difference between 55 and 50 isn't that significant compared to, say, 18 to 24. I mean, the difference from 18 to 24 is pretty remarkable. The difference between 50 to 55, it's subtle. It is there, as you can see, but it's not a massive difference. Anyhow, with that said, I'm going to throw my little 50 millimeter prime on and open up the aperture, and you'll see how incredibly 3D this thing is going to be. Now, because I've opened up the aperture on the 50 millimeter prime to 1.8, I've had to change the settings, so I'm shooting at 1/60th of a second now because 1.8 is allowing much more light to come in to the photo. Other than that, everything else is the same. I'm still shooting at ISO 800. Yeah, so here we go. So with this, you can clearly see that Scooby-Doo is completely and utterly separated from the background entirely. The whole area on the couch where the blankets are is completely blurred out, and he stands out like it's almost like a 3D movie effect, in a matter of speaking. Yeah, it's completely and utterly different. So when you hear, oh, you should get a 50 millimeter, don't think of it so quickly as I already have a 50 millimeter with my kit lens. It's not the same quality. That's the difference. What I'll do, I'm going to actually replicate a kit lens here. So I'm going to actually shoot at 50 millimeters, obviously, because that's all this lens does. And I'm going to change the aperture to 5.6 to bring it the same as what a kit lens would be. And you'll see why having a prime lens with a much more open aperture gives you way better photos. You can still pull it off to a certain degree, but not the same way. With the kit lens, it's a lot more work to get the same blurred background and whatnot. But the quality of a prime lens trumps a kit lens all the time, every time, period. So I'm going to change this to f5.6 and take one more shot, and then that should be it. Okay, so here's f5.6 at 1/15th of a second, ISO 800 on the prime 50 millimeter lens. And as you can see, the quality is still much higher. The blur is a lot more smooth than what you would get with the kit lens, even though the settings on the lens I'm using now is exactly the same as what you would get on the kit lens. It's the quality of the glass, because a prime lens has less moving parts. So it's easier to make, and the quality is a lot better because there aren't a whole bunch of different moving elements inside the lens, so there's less distortion. So that's why you always hear, get a 50 millimeter, get a 35 millimeter, 77 millimeter, whatever, or 100 f2.8. They're all prime lenses. The reason being is the quality difference is staggering compared to a kit lens or a lot of zoom lenses. There are a few zoom lenses that do provide as much quality as a prime. However, they're quite a lot of money. So as a beginner, get yourself a couple of primes and your photography will go through the roof. Yeah, so I hope that this helps. I was going to do a whole bunch of other lenses, but you get the idea. Between 18, it's an exaggeration. So beyond 50 to 135 or 100, then 135, 150, 200, and going up. It's just going to be more and more of the same. You're basically cutting off the field of view around the subject as you go up in focal length. So that's pretty much it. I hope this helps explain some of exactly what this does. And if you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. And I will see you on the next video.